as the evangelist of the ministry, I encourage you all to think our main goal. Our main goal is, as Pastor Zaki mentioned yesterday, by using this approach as a bridge to attract the soul for Christ. This is our main goal. Think about it always. Let us pray. Our precious Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for that you gave us an opportunity to gather together for this glorious purpose. Help our instructor, Dr. Martha Wright, to share us related with this training to how to help the people to understand more, to interact more with native speakers, and to worship in your churches. Help us to get many knowledge from this, the second day of conference. We give you the remaining time to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Dr. Martha, this is your time.
Thank you. What I'd like to start with, actually, is some feedback from you. Is there anything you thought about between last night and today that is something that puzzles you, troubles you, that you're concerned about, that you disagree with, that surprised you, that stood out in your mind? What's something that pops into your mind from last night's session? Lachlan, yeah.
A question, which is,
Okay.
if
Is this a mic that's picking up people, by the way?
I don't know if it's you, right?
I'll speak loudly. My question is, if you're working with somebody who knows very little English, how do you evaluate where they're at when you don't know them and don't know very much other than the few things that they say? Especially if they're not saying a lot because they don't know how.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What does that sound like to you? If you met someone who has very limited English, how do you evaluate them? I think you just have. I think you did just evaluate them. If, for example, when we used to do literacy evaluations, if a person couldn't recognize the letter A, they did not, that's where they were at. That's where they were. I know some people think saying that's where they're at is bad English, but I'm used to it, so I say it. Anyway, you take them from where they are at that point. So that's, you have evaluated them. That's what they know. If they know almost nothing, that's the place that they are. They are, we call that like 0 level a lot of the time. It's 1 is some English, like 1 or 100 level. What more did you want to get?
I guess what I mean is that I don't know that for sure because they aren't saying a lot, but maybe they know more than they're saying.
Evaluating comprehension.
Yeah. I mean, is it just so obvious that I can do it having no experience, pretty much? Or are there...
I think when it's that level, and then you just take it from there. You just move from there. You go, if they seem to comprehend, if they pick up things more quickly than you expected, because in fact their comprehension is better than you estimated at the beginning, I'm not sure you can judge that fine a distinction at the get-go. Yeah.
There are people who, for lack of a word, fake it well. They want
Oh,
to please
yeah.
you. They want, do you understand? Yes.
Yes, but you
They
don't say, do you understand?
No.
Because anybody can nod their head. I've stood in front of classrooms where there were literally hundreds of students, and the teacher says, "Is it clear?" And what does everyone say? What are you going to say? No? No, of course you're not going to say no. So what your evaluation has to include something where they have to demonstrate. You don't just say, do you understand? And they say yes. Where you show them a picture, for example, and they have to identify it. You don't just say, is this a dog? And they say yes. You say, what is this? Or you point to this. Point to the dog. Show me the dog, the cat, whatever. That kind of thing where they have to actually do something that unless they understood you, they couldn't do it. Okay? That's actually an interesting point in some way, because in a lot of instances perhaps in schools where people have come from, they've had this very passive style of education where they could basically sit there for 5, 6, 7 years and learn almost nothing at all and get sort of pushed along, and they copy down off the board. One of the things I discovered, and this is a big problem in many developing countries, I discovered when I was in Eritrea. I did not know any Arabic. So I went to the school where they taught in the medium of Arabic, assuming I would understand nothing, which in fact I did not understand anything. But you know what? I copied things down off the board, and I pointed to things in the book just like everybody else. I rolled right along with everyone else and understood nothing and had learned nothing. And at the end of the day, I went and showed somebody who did speak Arabic. He said, oh, you have beautiful handwriting. And I said, well, I copied it off the board. So sometimes people are accustomed to a lot of passive things, and they may not realize that they don't understand. So your teaching has to, in a sense, force them to just do things, to interact, to produce language that they couldn't just do by imitating or copying or repeating. Or, as you say, just saying, yes, I understand when.
This is actually very helpful. That's
Oh,
kind
okay.
of, I mean, that
Good.
does answer what
Okay, okay.
to some degree.
Yeah, yeah.
So force them to do stuff that they
Yeah.
could only do if they understand it.
Yes. I think the thing to bear in mind is what Pastor Malaku said. What is the purpose of this? This is the purpose. The purpose is to connect with them. How do you connect with anybody? Right enough, there's a language barrier, and you're trying to cross that, and you're trying to help them cross it as well. But it goes both ways. And if you consistently, I think, make them feel at ease and comfortable and appreciated, I think a simple thing like making a point. I discovered from some pictures that got taken of me that I have a tendency to scowl, which I didn't notice. And when I'm thinking, I go like this, when I'm making a point. Well, that's a very ugly face. That's not a nice face. That doesn't make somebody feel happy. So I consciously try to raise my eyebrows so I'm not scowling. Try to smile, try to be at ease. And I also, there are a couple things that I would say for those of you who are new to teaching, and especially in this kind of situation, keep that real goal in mind, which is to form that relationship, to demonstrate the love of Christ as you yourself. You all have your own personalities. This isn't a program where you have to, do A, B, and C, and you're gonna win. You're gonna succeed. What's success in this program? The success is that someone has formed a relationship with somebody who can help them communicate, who can help them participate in the life of the church, in their life at all here in America, who makes them feel at ease. And those little steps in terms of English are okay. If it takes them forever and a day to get he and she right, but they have formed this bond of affection, and as I say, through your showing the love of Christ to them, they have gotten something priceless. Sorry, I get all choked up with this. But anyway, sorry. So you can relax a little and not feel like you're doing something wrong, not fear that you're doing something wrong or that you're not teaching them well enough. Just taking them through these easy things a little bit at a time. So anyway, so those of you who have teaching experience may may feel more like, you want them to succeed. You want to teach well so that they learn. And of course you do, but a lot of that may have to do with you giving them the freedom and the opportunity and the comfort and the ease of just being with you and interacting, okay? Because hopefully they'll transfer that to their real life and will have more interaction with other people. There were a few things that what I want to do today, though, is not just stand up here and yak and tell you what you ought to do, but show you some of the materials that we have here, that they have in the ministry office. Some of them we brought here. And I wanted you to try getting together, even in just like little 2s or 3s, and pretending to do a little bit of a lesson and see how it feels, okay? See how you would respond. The other person who's pretending to be the student, you can pretend to not understand. You can point at the wrong thing. Give the other person a chance to try out their feedback and correction. There are a couple basic principles about feedback and correction that I would really encourage you to keep in mind, especially if you're like me and you're kind of goal-oriented or task-oriented, and you want to make things happen. I think most Americans, I'll say, are pretty uncomfortable when they ask a group a question and there's no answer. No one answers. No one moves. How do you feel? How do you feel when I ask you a question and you get this?
Answer.
Everybody feeling uncomfortable? I am. I'm dying. I'm absolutely dying. As a teacher, I can't. This is one of the hardest things, is being patient. Giving people time to process. They aren't necessarily being stubborn. They may actually have a very good idea what the answer is, but processing in a second language takes longer. It just takes longer. I think it physically takes longer. I think the synapses and neurons that you have to, work through, your brain has to go somewhere. So give people time. I had one friend who told me that when she worked with Asian students, especially those from Southeast Asia, she would count to 4, and I said, I don't think I could do that. I can't imagine. You ask it. These are college classes, with a whole room full of people. You ask a question and you count to 4. It's torture. It's torture for most teachers. You feel as though you're failing. You're not failing. Just be patient. Give them time. And if they know that they have enough time, that also reduces their anxiety. There's something that they call the affective factors. Affective as in emotional, psychological emotional factors. And there's, whoa, that really sticks. Okay. There's what they call, I love these expressions. This is one I really appreciated when I first heard about it. Let's make it purple. Oh, okay, sure. There's facilitating anxiety and debilitating anxiety. What do you think is the difference between those?
Facilitating helps you to do things better, and debilitating helps you to not do better.
Exactly. What would be another term, do you think, for facilitating anxiety? What else could you call it? Helpful. Anticipation. Being excited. When you're going to, go to an amusement park or go down the shore, or you're going to play a football match. You're psyched, right? That's great. And that helps you. Debilitating anxiety, of course, is stage fright, freaking out, getting cold feet, choking, right? How many of you have experienced that at some time or other? Have you ever completely choked in front of a group of people? Oh my word. I have literally choked. I choked when I was singing in someone's wedding. It was the worst, the worst. So I was sure I had ruined their wedding. Apparently not. But anyhow, they're still married. So if people, you can be pretty sure that people are going to come to your setting, to your class, to your tutoring session with some of both of those. They're excited and they want to learn. But there's a pretty good chance that that debilitating anxiety has been a big part of their lives. When they're trying to talk to somebody and they get flustered, they can't think of the words, and someone may try to help them, and that only makes it worse. And so, it just depends. Some people have had a lot of negative experiences, and once burned, twice shy. In this case, maybe once burned, 10 times shy. So you want to be excited and positive, but reduce the anxiety level so that they can think. And part of doing that is just being patient. If they know that you will wait for them, I think that really means a lot, because most Americans won't. People will be impatient, they'll yell at them, they'll shout at them, they'll dismiss them. How often does that happen to language learners in America, where somebody in some public situation just blows them off? It does. I mean, we see it. I see it in everyday life. So you're that patient person. This is their safe space. When you explain or ask a question, one really strong piece of advice I would give you is, in addition to being patient and letting them process, while you're letting them process, don't keep asking the question over and over. Especially don't rephrase it. You may think you're helping, you're making it worse. For beginners, real beginners. I think even older students too, because they can't tell if, when I'm saying, let's see, show me how to go from the school to the church. I mean, when you're going from the school to the church, how is it you get there? See, I mean, don't do that kind of thing where you rephrase it, you move the phrases around, you add words, you crank it up. You think you're helping, but you're probably making it more confusing. If a student doesn't understand the question, how do I get from the school, what did I just say? The school to the church, right? I've already forgotten my own question. Sorry about that. Show me how to get from the school to the church. Okay, you've waited a couple seconds. They're looking. What could you say that would be helpful and not confusing?
Take your time.
Understood that. If they understood, take your time, that would be good.
If they understood, okay. No, I just mean, how would you clarify what you asked them to do? Show me how to go from the school to the church.
Is it like on a map? Would you be
Yeah,
like,
it's on a map, okay.
Maybe point to the places that you're talking about.
Point, you could point silently.
Do you need to show them a picture of what the school is and what the church is?
Yeah, they've got this. Let's say they've got this.
That
shows them. This shows them. I've said to them in words, and I haven't pointed to anything, show me how to get from the school to the church.
And you do not rephrase it. Is that what you said earlier?
What I'm saying, don't keep rephrasing it as in, okay, well, if you start at the school, now where do you go after that? And where do you, don't keep adding more words to it, because they're just processing those, whatever it is, 10 words.
Wouldn't it depend whether what they're not getting is
Well,
the
right.
school and the church?
Right,
or,
we don't
or
know.
The concept
Okay,
of
so how do you
going?
find that out?
Show me.
You could trace your finger. You could say, what's a very simple question? Where is the school? School? Where is the school? Wait, they find it. church. Where is the church? And they find that. What I mean is you can break it down into things that they already understand easily. We're going to assume that by lesson 6 they understand where is, okay, in this, whatever this like workbook is, okay. So yes, everything depends. I mean, this is just an imaginary situation of a student who's, you know, on lesson 6 of this beginning course, and they've got a map, and I'm asking them. But if you ask a question like that, that has words in it they probably know, and you're asking them to do something specific, don't over-explain, is my point, and don't keep harassing them, in a sense, by asking the question. If you restate it more slowly so that you isolate the words. Isolating words is really key for learners. Remember we talked about how English is mushed together, informal English, the words are run together, we delete things. If you can speak in a way that makes each word clear, then they are more likely to understand each word. As opposed to, if you speak in a way that isolates these words, it makes, you see, if when I do that, I've just run them together in a blur. So for them, segmenting things into words is often hard. And for you to know which words they don't understand, you need to have broken them out so that they can hear. They can't ask what they don't understand if they can't pick them apart. So my point in asking question is keep it simple, keep it slow, be patient, be ready to wait, and even if you are uncomfortable waiting for an answer, that's just something you're going to have to learn to deal with. And you may just have to really discipline yourself. It's very hard for me personally, as I mentioned before, very, very hard. I really struggle waiting for people because it just is, it violates my cultural norms. I did, yes?
I would say, English my second language, I would say that it is beneficial and helpful to write down some keywords. I would say straight, right, left, and that helps you know the student to make a sentence.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of lessons. Now we have. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. By the way, I haven't met you. You are
Leila.
Leila. Okay. Nice to meet you. I'd like you guys to try doing, as I say, a few little activities. But first, I'd like to run through. I think it's quite a nice example of a lesson plan that Jonathan gave me, and that you and Deborah, that you got from the local Baptist church that's put together by the, what is it, North American Baptist Mission Board, yeah. The North American Mission Board, I believe, is related to the International Mission Board, and they are all over the world, including many parts of East Africa that I've been in. And they do a lot of education as well. Some of you want to know where to begin with things. First of all, I do want to encourage you to keep remembering there isn't one single right way to do things. And I'm not saying that because I'm being a smart aleck or lazy or I don't want to teach you. I feel as though it's good for people to have that freedom to be themselves, to do the kinds of things that they enjoy with their learners, because this is about a relationship. So if you're trying to be something that you're not because you feel like, oh, that's what an English teacher really does, then you're going to be at odds with, I think, with what you're trying to teach, okay? So you will have particular interests. Let me give this, let me pull up. Here we go. All right. I did not print this out, although I could have. All right. This is a lesson plan that some of you were wondering how to incorporate biblical teaching in Scripture. Well, I don't think that your lessons are meant to be exclusively Bible teaching. They're meant to be more life skills because, as I understand it, the idea of what we're doing here is trying to help people integrate into ordinary life, the life of the church, as well as to share the gospel with them. But there are multiple ways of doing that. One thing is that if you're teaching just Bible stories, they're not going to learn how to find the local gas station, because that ain't in the Bible. And so something that you might do, depending on how you feel about your sharing your testimony or forming this relationship, you might simply begin with praying for your students. We were saying last night, I think Ryan was saying this also, I grew up in a non-Christian home, or a nominally Christian home, we'll say. I never heard anyone pray for me or anyone I knew personally. Never. That just, it blew my mind. I was like completely brought to tears the first time somebody prayed for me at a Bible study. I couldn't believe it. And I imagine some of these learners may feel that way. Not the ones who are currently in the church. They will have heard that before. I guess, maybe not. I don't know. Has someone prayed for them? Like, that isn't necessarily common in everyone's background, even if they have some church background. So praying for them. But here, for example, they have, this is at the very beginning of the side-by-side book, and here's a beginning lesson. And for these kinds of things, you can have a template like this that has your idea of what a lesson plan should consist of. You may feel like this is something that's a bit beyond you, asking about having the lesson objective and having this list of all the things you need. If you don't want to write out an objective for yourself, if you don't feel like that's the kind of teacher you are, you can just say, I'm going to do this chapter, okay? We're going to work on this. We're going to work on saying, what's your name, okay? And you can say, well, I want them to be able to identify this many words. A lot of the time, the objectives for a given lesson are kind of obvious. They're in that lesson. That's what's there, okay? So if you want to do this kind of planning, you can. If you want to do a particular activity, get the stuff ready, of course, ahead of time, or it might be right there. You may also be somebody who likes to wing it. If you like to wing it, do you know what I mean by winging it?
Spontaneous.
Yeah, just doing what happens, just going off on rabbit trails. I don't think that's a bad thing. I actually love to wing it, so I hope I'm not winging it too obviously here today. Just kidding. I did actually plan this. But you can just see what comes up. I love doing that because I feel like that really addresses the needs of the learners. I can't necessarily predict their needs. Maybe ranked beginners, you can predict that they don't know anything, so you have to do whatever's there with them. But sometimes they ask the darndest questions, and those questions are important to them. We had many experiences in Uganda. It's an interesting thing when you have a Bible study or a gathering or a lesson or something, and at the very end you say, does anyone have any questions? They answer that very literally. Any questions? Any questions? They don't think you mean any questions about what we just learned. You have to say that. If you say, does anybody have any questions, they will ask you any question that comes to mind. Like, is it really true that there are spirits in pools of mercury on top of that mountain? That was a question. And then we talked about that was really important. This was this was a deep fear that people had, and they wanted to ask. I was the only Christian, like evangelical Christian that they'd ever talked to. They didn't trust some of these priests and folks that they knew. They wanted me to tell them because they believed me. And I was like, well, no, I don't think so. I don't think, first of all, I don't think there are any pools of mercury up there. I was wrong about that. There is mercury on this particular mountain. But I said, no, I think you're good. We're okay. The Holy Spirit, Jesus has overcome the world. If you have the Holy Spirit within you, you don't have to fear imaginary things on the mountain. Okay. But anyway, so sometimes people ask questions you can't anticipate. Beginning learners are not likely to do that particular kind of thing because they can't formulate the questions. But they may have some other issues. If you like songs, you can have songs. If you want to have handouts. Now, this is a very ambitious lesson plan, in my personal opinion. Greeting, scripture, and prayer. I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and we said, well, this would actually probably take about half an hour if we honestly went through all that, not 5 minutes. Unless you just do something, fairly quick and straightforward, and, that may be okay for your class. You can, again, introduce the new vocabulary, just as you said. Now, they recommend, and I do like this for beginners. I'm a bit of a fan of the total physical response method. What did I say that was? What was total physical response method? I mentioned that.
Several different ways to teach the same thing. So like, this is what we were talking about last night, where you act things out and you verbally teach things, or maybe, and then you have maybe them read what they, I don't know.
Yeah. It starts, you might just say charades. It's kind of, to me, a little bit over-technical term for something that's more simple than that. But you speak only in the target language, which you're probably going to do anyway, only in English, and you demonstrate things. You demonstrate it a few times. You let them watch you. They can listen. You don't have to go directly to speaking. When you were learning your native language, did you talk right away? I don't think any of you talked when you were 4 days old. But you all heard your native language from maybe before you were born. That's what some people say. People who play French tapes to their children in the womb in hopes that they'll be multilingual. Those people exist, yeah. That's.
Does it work?
I don't think so. Although I have heard that children do hear some of their mother's native language and develop a sense of the sound system of that language even before they're born. Don't know if this is true. I don't want to be passing on like bogus scientific non-facts, but that may be true. Anyway, so you give people a chance to listen. When you do the words, you have something to refer to. If it's total physical response, if it's something you can demonstrate with your body by moving or something. Pictures also, if you're using the Oxford Picture Dictionary, if you're using it with your students and you don't want them to have their native language in there, make sure you get a copy that doesn't have that native language so that they can't. If they want to have theirs at home and look it up, but in class, if you want to stay English only, you have to abide by that. Anyway, if you have pictures in your book, we have some books that you can practice with. I'd like you to try doing a little introductory part. I'd like you to try doing, whether it's, you can pick out some books from here. We have a number of copies of Side by Side. We have Touchstone, which is similar. Many of these beginning books are the same. You don't all have to use the same book, because you're not all going to be in the same room, right? You can use whichever ones you like. I think, Jonathan, you have, did we say there were 7 or 8 student copies of this? 4 or 5 teachers' manuals. It comes with an audio CD and CD-ROM, and if any of you have a CD player, if you can find one, I don't know, you might have to go to Goodwill or come to my house, because of course I have all that stuff. Thankfully we're not using tape players, but any of these books are something that you can use. You need something to refer to. None of them is perfect, but you can use them. So what I'd like you to do is try doing a little vocabulary. Try doing some using visuals or mime as in, charades, for an early chapter. Okay, maybe you could get in groups of like 3 or 4. Does that seem like a good idea? And one person will be the teacher, or as they say in Uganda, the tisha. I always like that because it sounds like t-shirt. Use it. Tisha, you come. And try doing a little vocabulary. Find the vocabulary there and pick some words. See if you can enunciate in a way that's clear. I don't know if you noticed that my enunciation even for this talk is not like ordinary conversation. And one of the things I do try to make a point of is, that's kind of a pun, but is final consonants. Those can be hard for people to hear and very hard for them to imitate. And you can't expect people to learn to pronounce something that they've never heard. So it's kind of up to you to have really, really gorgeous enunciation, I think, if you can. So, we lost this. So right now, how about you all leap to your feet? Here we go. You gotta you don't get to just sit here all day. You gotta do some. You can leap slowly. Although, as you already know, I'm very impatient. So we have over here, I'm not going to let you use the teacher's guide. You've got to figure it out. Here are 3 copies of side by side. They are basically identical. That lesson that's on the board is based on that. I think it says page 2. So maybe between that, if we had like 4 groups of 4, does that work out? I'm going to let you organize yourselves however you like. Okay? Go to there and pick up a book.
But we just realized there has to be some basic knowledge to answer this.
Yeah, it is. There.
I mean, my first thought was somebody simple, maybe at Clarkston, Atlanta, that they would never understand address, like where live, where.
Yeah.
But instead of where live, we have to.
Where do you live?
Where do you live?
Where do you live? Where is your house? Okay. Now, to teach some of this vocabulary, some of this doesn't lend itself well to, walking. It's not like standing and sitting, like some other things. But what might you be able to bring if you show address?
You can bring them out.
You can bring a map. You can bring a letter.
Letter, yes.
A letter. A phone bill. Well, no, we don't get phone bills. Maybe a gas bill. I don't know. Does anybody get any bills in paper anymore? Yeah, sometimes you do.
Subscription.
Yeah, right. They may get more paper stuff. I don't know if they
And
do.
they have to have it for
Yes.
proof of
Right.
residence.
That's right, for all those things. So, but how would you teach even just the word name? Think about what you would do to teach people the word name. Let's see.
What I guess is,
So for Bert, I would also point at the other.
I started even more basic. Said, I am rich. My name is Rich. What is your name? Or who are you?
Okay.
And then, but
Now,
there's probably better
can
ways
you
to do it.
isolate your words a little better? Not what's your, but what is your name?
What is
Your.
your name?
Yeah. Even name. My name is Martha.
We should repeat back to
Name. His name is Rich. Name. His name is Rich. His name is Daniel. Giving people time to process. Because each of those words, there's this chung chung, chung chung, chung chung, that's got to happen in their brain for them to process it, right? For rank beginners. People who are a little farther along, I mean, like the ladies who, that come to church, a lot of them, they'd be way past this. This would be a piece of cake for them. The thing, though, that they may not know, and I may have mentioned this before, is that learners that I've met sometimes have heard ordinary English, but they don't really know what you're saying. They've heard somebody say, "What is your name?" And they're like, I think I'm supposed to say, "My name is Berhane." Okay, Berhane And then they get a good response, so they figure that must be it, but they don't actually know what somebody said. So if you can isolate things for them and over-enunciate, you'll be, especially those final consonants. Those are hard. They're hard for a lot of people to pronounce. Yes, you had a question.
Well, do you think it helps for them to see the words written out?
Oh, of course. Yeah, definitely. So they would have books. Where is the word name? Show me name, and then you ask them to point at it in their book. Name. I'm a big one for reading by running your finger under. I really am. In some countries, they tell the children not to do that. I do not know why. It's also countries where people get all the way through primary school and can't read. So I don't think it's a good. So you point at these things. Can you think of something you could bring or do that would show them? You got a phone? Phone. You hold up your phone. My phone number. Phone number. Ask them to write their phone number. Can they write it? It's very important. They need to be able to write that phone number. I mean, but don't give it to anybody.
I guess they don't list your number. I'm sitting here thinking.
Yeah, well, you could pull yourself up as a contact, maybe. Yeah. You could even do a fun thing in class where we call it in Uganda, you flash someone. That is to say, you call them and then immediately hang up, so that they get your number, but you haven't incurred any cost on your phone. Because they pay. A lot of people from other countries, they're not used to this like unlimited plans. They're super conservative with their phones, so you get charged for every second, literally.
Some of them text.
Some of them text, yeah. Maybe they could share their phone numbers with each other. Something like that. And say the numbers. My phone number is, have them learn to pronounce. You could work on numbers. You could do name and address, and that could take a whole class. And is that bad? Is that too little? No, it's great. Because you did it thoroughly, and everyone understood. So when we look at, here's reading. There's a reading section. Your class may or may not do reading. I don't know. You'll have to decide on whether they want to, how much they want to learn to read. If they are very, very limited learners and don't know English letters and haven't learned the alphabet, you might not want to do so much. But you're probably going to. They're going to need some of that. So work on how you would do that, and what things would you use? What would you bring to class? What would your things be? And how would you try? Just imagine that you have a map, for example, or use your phone. Be creative. Think of something. Yeah.
You mentioned a comment, something I didn't know whether to ask in class or not.
Yeah.
Are you going to be helping me the behind the scenes, or is it this? How do we help our ladies in our church that have some English, but it's not good? And there's some of the ones that you talk, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? And you think there's comprehension, and there's phrases.
Well, they know it's like it's a general sound, and they know how to like say good or whatever. How do you do
maybe
more
your tone
than
of
that?
voice clues them into.
And that may be our first biggest need, is getting them up to speed, and then as we go on.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know if you're going to give tips to us, or you're working with.
Well,
it doesn't have to be this class.
Well, we can. I do want to talk about that in a little bit. I do want to be a little bit careful because I know their husbands are here.
That's why.
So I want to be a little bit. No, what I was going to say is that one of the things that Deborah and I talked about quite a bit is if some of the people who are having trouble integrating, that they could have kind of an established buddy, if you will, or a certain American buddy, who
they're in a cluster.
Right, because right,
someone they can grow to trust.
Maybe they can sit with them. Maybe that's who their English teacher is. Maybe when they don't know how to do something, they can call you. But somebody who knows them a little bit more than, hi, how are you? It is hard to get past that. But the other thing is that, and Deborah and I had a long conversation. She has a million great ideas. She's your person to ask for great advice, for sure. but is to try to have some shared experiences so that you have anything to talk about. I don't have anything to talk about to people at church either, whom I don't know. It doesn't get past hi, how are you, because we have nothing in common. I don't know anything about them. You know, I go to a super friendly church in Philadelphia. They are great about reaching out to people and to newcomers. But sometimes it just involves really stepping. I think we are the ones that have to step outside of our comfort zones, because they're already outside of their comfort zone being here at all. Okay, let's not make it any worse. But to figure out ways to establish friendships. Are there any things that you can do with them on other occasions? Yeah, not only go to lunch, because going to lunch is, again, it's a conversation, but you're not doing anything. It's a bit like, you know, like being on a date. Do you really want is that really how you get to know somebody?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
By having dinner? No.
Right.
But is there something you can do together? Can you go somewhere? Can you take their kids somewhere on a Saturday? Is there a park you could go to? Is there some pretty place? Take them shopping. Yeah. And these ladies are very nice. They, you know, they're not going to. I don't think it would be awkward to take them shopping. I think that would be okay. Take them somewhere they need to go.
Because that's what I do when someone.
They are reluctant to come over for supper.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you say they're?
They are reluctant to come over. They'll have you over,
Yeah.
but they don't want to come over to your house. Or at least that's what we have faced. Some of them maybe because we have a dog, then bite, but
yeah.
That's a factor for those particular
A lot of
countries.
Africans are afraid of dogs. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, it just might be that you got to break the ice again. But we've over the years, the various OP churches that I've been in, we've always had this problem of how to develop real fellowship, even just among the Americans, whether irrespective, you know, whether they're from other countries or not. And so, but it's the having shared experiences. What do you do for fellowship? Fellowship luncheons are okay. But a lot of the time people sit with their own friends and they don't hang out anyway. So it may be that somebody needs to take the bull by the horns a little bit and make people do things in a little different way. As I say, at our old church we had the fellowship committee. For example, they identified certain families that would always invite visitors to their home for lunch. Which somebody like me growing up in the church, that blew me away. I couldn't imagine. You've never met me before and you're inviting me to your house. This is so awesome. And we would hang out and have a great time. Maybe when you invite them over, they can also, if it's a nice day, you can go for a walk, you can do something. Is there something that they need? Do they need help moving? Do they need help picking something up? Transportation's a big problem. Can you do something with their kids? So, but if you can find some shared experiences and shared needs, then you have something to talk about. And, you know, then you'll actually have something to talk about. So, but you can think about what's reasonable and creative, you know, for around here. I don't know, it's just a thought. I mean, where I live, you know, it's a big city, there's lots of cool things that are easy to walk to, and, you know, we can do a lot of that kind of thing. Even just going for a picnic in a place that they've never been, that they might never have seen, a historical site or something. Yeah.
Are you in Philly proper?
Well, I have lived in the city, yeah, a lot. Yeah. So I go to, it's called Grace and Peace. It's a PCA church. Have you ever heard of 10th Pres? Yeah, it's a mission group, 10th Pres. 10th Pres is where Dr. Boyce was. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. So, all right. Well, I'm perceiving a lot of chit-chat going on here, but I'm sure it's very valuable.
Yeah, because we really, we've learned something, but I'm not sure.
Okay. What have you learned?
Shall I?
Yes.
Take it away.
Well, we started out with this book, and
Okay.
we weren't familiar with it at all.
That's for reading. Yeah, that's a reading
well,
book.
so obviously, then we looked back at the table of contents and saw, it's like all alphabet forever and ever. But, well, I'll just recap.
Yeah,
we started
okay.
out, and Malaku started reading the things and pointing at the sentences, which to me was, if I'm pretending to not know English, I don't know anything about what he's saying. You know, I said, I think you should point at the pictures, right? And so then we got somewhere, girl. This is a girl, bird, you know. And then we figured out, oh, it's over here.
Right. Yeah. Well, as I say, this is a reading book. This isn't kind of as much what I had in mind for you to do something where you're actually teaching them some new vocabulary that is what they're going to use in sentences and questions, like chapter 1, even basically. That's what that lesson was that was up there, okay? Or in the Touchstone book, I think they have similar things. Oh, that's the workbook, okay. Yeah, one of the things you are, come to think of it, going to want to notice, a lot of these sets of books have different components. Like this has a workbook, which is what it sounds like. It's for practicing writing, typically, and reading and stuff. So the regular book that you would use in class, okay, they usually have your kind of like objectives at the beginning. They tell you what it is you're going to do. There can be an activity where they ask you to point at pictures of people probably saying thank you or hello, or this guy's leaving, so what is he probably saying?
Goodbye.
Bye. See ya. Okay, something like that. And then these are some things that you could demonstrate. Okay, you can demonstrate these. If you're the sole teacher, you may have to demonstrate in a funny way where you play both roles. You say, hello. Hello. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Now, what did I just do? I used very informal language, and you can't understand those expressions very well. So, you might want to break some of these things down so that people can understand them. One of the things that can happen, even with learners, some folks here were asking me about learners who are farther along, who are used to hearing these things all the time. Sometimes people have told me, who were learners, that they'd heard things for years and even said them, but they didn't actually know what they were saying or what they were hearing because people speak so quickly, right? I don't know if you've had that experience also, but you were, using maybe written materials. But people who have lived here and haven't had a lot of written materials, have just heard things, they may need things enunciated very clearly and give them the opportunity to take in each word until you can see they've gotten used to it and they're moving on from there. Yeah.
That was one of my questions that came up. That is the difference between oral and written communication and when to use written. I mean, oral, you have to communicate with them verbally. But when do you integrate the written into the lesson? Is it after you get a sense of where they're at? Is it you use it simultaneously where something's on the board and you're referring to that while you're speaking?
That's a good point. For many learners, I think many learners coming from Africa tell me that they feel as though they learn better by hearing. But and I used to say, are you sure? Are you sure? And they were insistent, so I'll take their word for it. We all learned our first language by hearing, okay? So I know there are these different learning styles, but we all learn by hearing. And eventually, so this is sort of secondary. I think it's a good idea to begin with listening and demonstrating something visual. If you have a book like this where it's got writing in it already, you can still just point at the pictures. Hi, 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 hi. And then the students can follow you and imitate it, and then try doing it among themselves.
I was thinking about doing that with like a pen, where as soon as they get the concept of I and you, this is a pen.
Yes.
I use the pen to write.
Or better yet, I am writing.
Yeah, I'm writing.
I am writing.
I am writing. I am
It's
writing.
Like the simplest possible sentence.
Yeah, simplest possible sentence.
You write with a pen. And then something like that.
Yeah, yeah, you can do that kind of thing. These beginning, everybody starts out with greetings or names. You're going to have one or the other, personal information, this kind of thing. These are fairly busy books with a lot of detail in them.
I would get very confused if I was looking at that. Like
Yeah, don't you think they're
foreign
super busy?
language.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
real cluttered there.
They're very. Some of them are very cluttered. These are not as cluttered, but they're still pretty cluttered. I'm not sure why that is, because we notice it. How come the people that wrote these books didn't?
They want to print your pages.
I don't know. Maybe they think it's
I think there's a lot of
charming.
bad teachers out there.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't know.
I know it's true in my field.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, what's your field?
Music.
Oh.
There's a lot of bad music teachers.
A lot of terrible English teachers too. So you will have to use these things as you see fit. You could, if you want to, let's say this is your textbook, and you want to maybe photocopy a page and cover this, or you cover the text and just have them look at that. That's up to you. If you have a digital version of your book and you show it on a laptop. I have a friend, that's what he did for all his refugee classes. He went with his laptop to somebody's apartment. They only had like 3 people sitting around, and half of them were walking in and out a lot of the time anyway, so it wasn't real organized. But you just pick and choose, so you could cover things. But a lot of using visuals, using physical objects, if that's relevant, using either pictures, physical objects, motions, and hands, and getting them to move and point. The time.
Yeah, time or eat.
Yeah, right. Walk.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, stand, jump. The other thing that you can do is use storybooks that have some action in them, and but you focus on a certain word. There's one called Hunda's Surprise. We did all the time. It's a really cute book. It's very repetitive. And Hunda is walking. And yeah, you feel silly.
It's like, that's
It's
how
like-
you learn it, though.
That is how you learn.
Yeah.
But I don't think, in a small class, especially in somebody's home or just in a small room, I think people are willing to be a little bit silly. Okay? So how would you demonstrate some of these things? Does one of you want to try to be the teacher also? And just do something with your class here. And here, class, you understand or don't understand. Here, respond to your teacher, whoever's going to teach. I'll let you do your thing. Okay? Right. So, shall we? You've had a little bit of, as you look through, do you see some other things that you might do with some of these things? Yeah.
We actually got strategizing how to meet and work with them.
Great.
And we've gotten off the
Okay.
book, so we need to get back on the book.
It's okay. We can maybe move on, and maybe, do you feel like you could share some of these things with the group? Would that be okay? Are they things that you would want to share with the rest of the group here?
The strategy
Doesn't
is
feel
actually
awkward.
helping one family. So I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
We were like,
Teaching the
Yeah. And of course, you can find out from them what are some things they need, what are some things. Now, they may not know about activities because they don't know. They may not know of interesting places to go. It's just someplace beautiful. Just someplace beautiful that you could take them. The other thing, I should mention this later. A lot of these folks have EBT cards, food stamp cards or whatever they're called. The people who are unemployed get them. Those entitle them to very, very reduced admission to things like museums. They can get in for like $2 and take 3 people with them. Yes. So you can take them places. They may not know that, and they may not know how to get there, and they may not have a car. But you could take a busload of people with EBT cards, and everybody gets in for like $2 a head. And you know, if the church foots the bill for that, like maybe that's okay, or maybe they pay half, or maybe the church does you know, the money thing, you decide what you want to do. But so there are some cool things they can do. Okay. All right.
Or you could do it both ways.
All right. Have you done some?
How do you explain that? I'm asking you, how are you? When you
With a routine response.
Yeah.
I am good. How are you? I am good. You have, because I'm sure that's what they said every time you came to class.
Oh, we said the exact same.
The exact same thing. So it's repetition of, and you know, the first time they say it, they might not get it, and it's expected that they'll get it, but you know, just like Laubach picked it up after a little bit of time. That's what the hope is. The concept is grasp.
I guess, yeah, with conversation.
We just, she started
You
with the
did
first
judgment.
picture, and we ran into a problem right away.
Oh, what's the problem?
Which was she's doing the objects in the picture or the conversation?
It's kind of hard to do the
You want to
conversation
say,
that's
how
in
are
the
you?
picture.
Teach us, how are
They
you?
have to know or
And I've got some
identify what that means.
because
The actions.
Yeah.
I can't really do it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So should we
What do
teach
you
that
think?
with
What
a
is-
picture or with physical?
Do you mean the question itself? The meaning of the question itself? It may, if that picture doesn't do it, I think, yeah, the physical works. You demonstrate it, and I think people can recognize that. They probably also know that once because it's pretty easy. I think most of the learners are going to know a few things. So, yeah, imagining absolute rank beginners is always a terrifying prospect, right? Because you think, what are we going to do? This person doesn't know a single word. You know, to me, it's a terrifying prospect too. Don't worry. So, what else can you? So, let's say they do understand that, and you demonstrate some things that you can say. Try to make the words clear so they can process and understand and really know each word. How do you want to put writing into this? Do you want to add some writing?
Maybe simple writing.
Yeah?
Well, I had another question. Sorry,
Yeah.
I feel like I keep interrupting with
You're
more
not at all.
questions.
I'm sure that's why you're here.
Having taught our kids phonics, we had a really fine book called Alpha Phonics by
I remember that one, yeah.
And that's like too complicated for a first lesson. It should have cat and simple words that don't have any mixed sounds and stuff like that.
I don't.
But
Well, that's.
I would, if they seem to be able, then I would want to start with
Yeah.
the most basic sounds, you know,
Yeah,
short vowels and
That
and
well
basic
for reading.
consonants.
Yeah. I think like phonics is also kind of its own stream
Yeah.
in the lessons. But as far as interaction skills, I think what you're doing right now, building on that, yes, I agree with you that this part of the reason I brought these here, I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to use these. The Laubach Way to Reading is, in fact, a time-tested method that has taught millions of adults. It's been used all over the world by missionaries. But again, it's for people who want to learn all these words, and they have these little shapes that go with them and all that kind of stuff. They have a shape
but
for each word.
I look at dish
It's a lot
and I'm
for
like,
one.
wait a minute, the SH sound, I'll be for
No,
it,
but
the
you don't
S
have
sound.
to. No,
You know?
they don't necessarily do everything perfectly decodable to begin with, because there's so little that you can decode if you hardly know any letters. So they're just they're working on initial sounds. Okay, for that. But anyway, back to the interaction. If I can just interrupt. So that is kind of a side thing, but we'll come back to that later. So you're going to have some sentences. How would you demonstrate this? How would you demonstrate it so that you can add those sentences, expand? How are you going to expand on that a little? But, keep taking things back to, developing this friendship and trust and patience and affection. And you show your address and the name of your town. Maybe you can ask them something about their house. That might come up if they have that capacity. I think we're envisioning people with zero English. That may or may not be the case. I don't think so. I imagine by the time you actually meet people, they're going to have some English, but what it will be is patchy. And so starting at the beginning with very simple things, you get to give them complete sentences with complete verbs, complete pronouns, all that stuff, so that they know what they're saying, they know what they're hearing, and they actually understand rather than guessing. Right. Because I think that is what happens a lot of the time is people, they get a little bit here and a little bit there, and they're like kind of guessing and doing a lot of smiling and nodding.
And that's why it's good, I guess, to start at the beginning of the books. Like,
Yeah,
even if you think they probably know it, then just review.
And they might not want to admit things they don't know.
Yeah.
So no one has to be embarrassed. They can just learn every little bit. So maybe we should,
It's also important to let them know, if you can, that English speaker, like native English speakers, don't always know either.
No, they don't. And they basically can never explain anything. Most people can't explain their native language. They've never thought about it.
Right.
Who knows? Okay, we have done a lot of talking about different things. I'd like to come back together and share some possibilities. I realize we're talking in huge generalities about imaginary situations, which is a little bit maybe frustrating or awkward. But I think you have begun to get a little bit of a sense of what may actually happen. You may have students who are absolute zeros who don't know a word of English. How likely is that, do you think, though, really, by the time you meet them and work with them? Do you think they'll have no English at all, or maybe know a bit?
They'll know a bit.
I think they'll know a bit. Yeah, they'll know something. They'll know something.
Understand you, but not be able to express themselves.
Yes. People can be here for many years and understand a whole lot and not be able to express themselves. It's a bit like me and French. I can understand a lot and I just choke when I try to say something because I can't put it together. And so in this space where you get to talk with them about that, okay, here are some of the things that you can do in the next steps after you've perhaps demonstrated some vocabulary, you've used pictures. We found here that the pictures weren't always great. Sometimes they didn't actually show clearly what it was you were trying to point out. Then can you act it out in a different way? Would they maybe recognize a tone of voice? Some of you had mentioned that people will respond to a question. They may not understand the words, but they recognize that tone of voice, like, so, how are you doing? They know what you're saying. And so you could act out the roles you model. The idea is that you model, give people time to process, give them time to take it in, model in a way that they can process it and can take it in. What did I say was important about modeling clearly? Enunciation. Even if you over-enunciate, I found that my students loved hearing me speak because they say, I can understand you. And I'd say, well, I hope so, it's my job. But you make that accommodation for them. That's called, some people call that foreigner talk. When you speak the way you need to foreigners so that they can understand you. It doesn't mean speaking ungrammatically, okay? Some of you mentioned that in modeling certain things, you don't want to say him, name, him. No, don't model ungrammatical English. That's not necessary. It's better just to say one word, which is not ungrammatical. Name. Karen. Her name is Karen. her name, and if you have to repeat the key word a couple times so that everybody's getting it, that's okay. And it will feel stilted and weird until you get used to it. You will then be able to gauge if this is too easy for your learners. If they totally get this, you don't need to belabor it. If they're getting it, oh yeah, her name's Karen. Yeah, sure. And my name's Martha. His name's Ryan. Oh, if they get that and they can respond in a way that shows understanding, accurate understanding, not just guessing, but real understanding, then you may be able to speed things up. But start slow, okay? You'll have your question and answer things, some repetition. What kinds of things might you need? Depending on the topic, you'll look at the topic before your next meeting with your students. See what kinds of things you would need. Does the book have a good map in it to show things? Does it have good pictures? Are the pages too busy? Are they too busy? Some of these have just too much stuff on it, or something that you're not going to use. Depending on your student's level, are you going to role play a famous person? That would be super fun, except I'm not sure that our learners would know the same famous people as we do. And I'm not very with it, and I don't know who famous people are. So that might or might not work. Famous television people or whatever, they may not watch the same things as we do, or, I mean, I guess you could use a few famous people like, the president or the queen, or I don't know, but that kind of thing, it may look like a cute idea. If you look at this and say, I don't think this is going to fly, then just skip it. Skip it. Skip it. You may find out their interests. They may follow sports and know some famous sports people. I wouldn't know those people, so that I'd have to look it up. But if there's a certain part of the chapter that, as I say, you don't feel really works for you, then don't feel compelled to do that. Skip over it. All right, go to the next thing. They have reading, they have listening. They do have, for example, in these chapters, they'll often do some focused pronunciation at the end, like linked sounds or something. I don't know. That you're not obligated to do each one of these things. If you're doing name and address, what's something that has an address that you could bring to class that would show them what an address is for? A letter, yeah, right, a letter, exactly. Maybe a bill. You might want to work with them to look at a bill to find the address. Have you ever looked at like a gas bill and tried to find your account number or something? Oh my word, I thought I could read. Apparently not. Apparently I'm a functional illiterate because I can't find my own name or account number on my gas bill because they're really hard to read. If that's a skill that you feel like your learners would like to have, you can go from not only speaking about an address to actually using something. If you don't want to bring your own gas bill in because you don't want your learners to see what you pay for gas every month, that's okay. You can always scribble out the numbers, whatever.
Redact.
Yes, redact it, thank you. But where's the address? They may not know how to find that on a form, and they're really struggling. They may need to practice writing their address. So you can turn a simple thing like name and address into a multifaceted lesson that is both useful in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. What's your address is one way of asking that. What's another thing that people usually say when they want to know what your address is? Where do you live? Yeah. And where do you? Where do you? Where do you live? Where do you live? That was, I'll tell you a funny story later about how that was a part of my dissertation that was very interesting. It was one of the questions in basic English in Eritrea too. Yeah.
What about contractions? We noticed some of the books have them,
They,
some don't. Or some of them introduce them, but that implies you already read some.
It implies you already read. It implies that you know what it's a contraction of. They are more common in speech. They're increasingly common in writing. Contractions, that is, like what's and isn't and don't and all that. It's only in very formal academic writing that you find, like no contractions. But what to do with that? I guess I would say it depends on the level of your student. I feel like it's beneficial to them to know what the real words are, uncontracted. What is your name? They need to know is. And it's something that people tend to delete. A lot of learners delete. And it's a very stigmatized marker of non-native speakers, that deleting is. It can be hard for them. They may or may not have that in their language. So, for example, it has what's your name, but where are you from, of course, because are is more difficult to contract. So I would say tell them what it really is, and then explain that in everyday life we say, what's your name? What's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? Where do you live? So you can explain what the words really are, so to speak, the basic words, and then tell them the reduced form as well. Does that answer your question? Because they're going to hear that.
If they know alphabet stuff.
No. It's also by sound. Yeah, it's by sound. If they write, again, I don't think we have to assume that all of the learners are going to be illiterate or rank beginners or absolute zero. Okay, I don't necessarily think they're going to be absolute zero. That's my impression of people who come to church. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Following on that, is there symbols that typically show up that we could use, like an equals sign?
Mm-hmm.
They use that in other languages, and if they do, can we use that to connect synonyms?
Yeah, I think that brings us to a good point of establishing some basic communication devices, both in writing and in gesture, okay? So that if in gesture you might say, what is your name? What's your name? What is your name? What's your name? Okay, so they could understand those are the same. That gesture to me means they're more or less the same. I don't know if it means that to somebody from Afghanistan. No idea. But you'll have to establish those gestures and symbols in your class. You may find that there's certain ones, certain books may have them. I actually didn't check this. But establish a few simple symbols like that. I usually use an equals, even though that may not be the most, linguistically accurate or something. But, okay, so for writing. For hand gestures, what are some gestures that you would use to communicate with people that would be helpful? Like if you want someone to repeat, if you want the class to repeat, what might you do? Okay, a lot of us are doing this, okay? I think that one works. Yeah, I think that works. Okay, and again, and repeat. Okay, so you gesture like directly at somebody. If you want people to say, what is your name, my name is, whatever, between themselves, how are you going to show them that they should do that? Yeah, you too. Yeah, just some simple. Now, the only thing is somebody going to be offended by you doing this? Somewhere. They might be. I got taken to task the other day by one of my students from Vietnam. She said, but that boy in his presentation, he pointed. It's very rude. And I said, it went right over my head. I didn't even notice. Did not even notice. So you'll have to find out what is okay. Maybe open hands. Open hands, I think, are a good gesture in most cultures, true? And so, okay? Maybe like this. You talk together. You two talk together, right? Not a parent, what can I say?
How about eye contact? Are there cultural differences with?
There are. It might depend on the age. My experience was that it was children who would avoid eye contact. That, like this. Or somebody who perceived themselves to be very much lower status. Somebody who, for example, in our experience in Africa, somebody who was coming to ask for a job would do this. And we didn't love it, but we recognized that they were being polite. They also did this when they came to ask for a job. They bowed down and put their hands up like this, refusing to look and holding their hand out like that, and greeted me. So there are lots of things that are culturally appropriate. One of the things is, though, is that's not very culturally appropriate here in the wider community. So establishing things which are comfortable for everybody, but also generally culturally appropriate, I think, are good. You know, we can't necessarily accommodate everybody. People should probably realize, though, that I would say, as an American, that not looking someone in the eye has negative connotations in most circles in the United States. So it's good for people to know that. What do Americans think if you don't look them in the eye?
You think you have something to hide.
You think you have something to hide? That what?
You're lying.
That you're lying. Yeah, you're dishonest. You're hiding something. That's why you're not looking at them. Because if you were honest, you would look them in the eye. How often have you heard somebody say, "Look me in the eye and say that again"? I hope that no one has ever said that to you. But so it's okay for people to have certain practices, but as gently as part of what you explain to people as you establish that trust, hopefully they'll feel very comfortable looking you in the eye, and that you can explain those things. And they'll know, because you have demonstrated patience and kindness and understanding and laughter and good humor and maybe food. I don't know, you've shared things with them that they will have that trust, that they'll know that when you explain something to them, it's for their good and not hurtful and not demeaning in any way. Because it doesn't help to let people do things that other people are going to object to or criticize them for. One thing that comes up sometimes is different ways of eating. I know we had students from Korea. These were business people, educated business people, middle-aged, who had what are by American standards very unacceptable table manners. They would eat in a way that sounded loud to us. And we agonized over whether to tell our students that if they were going to be doing business in America, they might want to stop smacking at dinner. And we did. And they didn't know, and they appreciated it because they didn't want to embarrass themselves. We care about you and we want you to succeed here. You're here. This is part of our culture. You might want to know, in your culture, you show appreciation by doing a lot of kind of making certain noises or belching or whatever, and that will be taken a different way here. So, and they appreciate it, and they're like, "Oh, thank you, oh, thank you, oh, thank you, teacher," because they realized they had been like snatched from the jaws of embarrassment. Okay, now you just got to get your feet a little bit wet today in doing some of these things. All right, this sample lesson would give you the chance to practice. You can do pronunciation practice. You can do more communication practices, going back to the same thing. You can drag these things out a lot. Would you do all of this in one lesson? I don't think so. I can't imagine having enough time to do this. Again, allowing people enough time. You might want to have a map if they're talking about where they're from, or being able to just say "I'm from" is pretty easy compared to might be easier to say than "my country." I don't know. You can, so that's also in these books. When you review, now here they actually recommend that they use phones. Oh, earlier, speaking of which, doing address and phone numbers. What are some fun activities that you could do with phones if you're telling about numbers and phone numbers?
Share contact.
Yeah, exactly. You could share a contact and then they have to read it. What about you dictating your phone number to someone? They have to put it in their phone, then they try to call you. See if they get you or not. Try entering someone's contact in your phone. That's something that's a practical skill. It involves interaction. It may involve negotiating meaning. You or they may pronounce a number wrong, get the wrong number. Of course, if they put the wrong number in and they call somebody else entirely, they may have to deal with that. What do you do when you get a wrong number? I mean, you could expand this. Do you see what I mean? You can take one little subject and expand it, make it a bit of fun. And then they will have interacted in a realistic way with something they actually get to do every day. And they've used only English to talk about those things. This teacher suggested that people use their cell phones to record themselves and listen to it. I've never done that in class. You could. Pretty much everybody has that capacity. Remember that anytime you involve technology, though, there's the possibility of things not working. Somebody's phone doesn't work. It can slow things down. You don't want it to take over the class and waste a lot of time. So if you're going to do something like this, you'll want it to be simple. They could record themselves on their cell phones at home or another time. They could have done last week's, and then they can come and play it. And you can give them some feedback, hear what they sound like. Okay, so that could be like an assignment, as they suggest. And you can close in prayer. In many parts of the world, people open and close meetings in prayer. Believe it or not, in Uganda, every kind of meeting you ever go to, they open and close in prayer, government or otherwise. So it isn't necessarily strange. Having lived over there a long time, I still find it really funny to go to a meeting and I'm just like waiting for somebody to open in prayer. And they don't. Oh yeah, that's right, we're at a university. They don't do this here. But so closing in prayer and sending them out with that positive concern, naming each one of them, maybe mentioning one of their children, that kind of thing. Now, one of the things that has also come up is how to facilitate ongoing interaction among members of the church and who are here often, how to integrate them, how to facilitate this kind of interaction that will help them grow in their conversational skills and be part of the church. And some of you guys we were talking a little bit about this. Could you share some of the things that we mentioned? We were talking about getting more involved with the learners.
Our group was talking about maybe taking the family to the park, taking them shopping, helping with yard work, helping just with practical things where they may need help with transportation.
Yeah.
Shared experience.
Yeah, having some, yeah.
Yeah, staff sharing experience, take them to a Braves game or something, or, yeah.
Take
them
what?
to a Braves game or something, like sharing experience,
yeah, that would be cool. One of the things we were talking about the other night is, I don't know if all recent immigrants are given EBT cards, but I think some of them do have those. EBT cards are what you have if you're receiving food stamps, I think, or on unemployment. That's what it is in my part of the world. But they often have a lot of benefits. You can go to what are otherwise expensive museums and things for very little. And they're meant for like mothers and kids, so they can take themselves and like 3 other people for maybe $2 a head, and instead of it being like $18 or $20 to go to, say, an art museum. I mean, that might be a trip. That might be really fun. Or go someplace that doesn't cost anything at all. Just someplace that's really beautiful, that adds some beauty to their lives. Some of them may work morning and night and not have those kind of like refreshing, beautiful times with a friend, and they can remember, oh, that's the place I went with Karen, and take some pictures together and be able to talk about that later, about something that you did. But also helping them with things they need. How are you going to know what they need?
But if they don't know how to tell us, so it would be wonderful if they learn how to tell us and be safe with us, so they can express to us what we can do for them.
Yes, that's good. Also, just if you can communicate with somebody in their circle of acquaintances who is willing to maybe be a liaison, to be some kind of intermediary that would, or somebody who's been through their experience and said, you know, the kind of thing that this family might really need is A, B, or C. You might be able to ask them. They might be reluctant to tell you of something that they need. I don't know. People, you know, some people are more outgoing about that sort of thing. Yeah, okay. Let's see, what were some things that I realized were just, I feel like we're just rushing through this so quickly, but I'm only here for a little while. Anyway, let me go down to this end bit. Yes?
Rich mentioned something about Google Translate, but are you saying that it's better not to, look up the word in their language, and then this is this, the clock is this. It's better not to.
It's better not to. And as far as sentences go, I don't trust Google Translate a lot of the time. It's pretty good with some of the major European languages, but I don't think it's going to give you very good Tigrinya.
Wow.
I just don't know. It might or it might not. What do you think, Zeki? Is that true? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Some that have to do with characters, differences.
I think it's just the amount of work that's gone into the artificial intelligence, honestly. It may also have to do with language similarities and differences. The major European languages are more similar to English than some of these. So I just don't trust it. I was actually telling somebody I was talking to in China about how we get such a kick out of reading like instructions that come with packages from China, and because obviously somebody has used Google Translate and the English is just bizarre, right? So, yeah, I mean that doesn't always happen, but let's face it, we've all found a few funny ones. So as far as things that you can do with your students, I think that I've given you as much general advice as I can about keeping your explanations simple. When I say limited choice in expression, if they want to know how to say, what is your name, don't tell them 10 different ways to say, what is your name? One is enough at a time, okay? One of the things I've experienced is by trying to be helpful and telling them all sorts of different ways of saying things. As they're more advanced, you can do that. But a person can only handle so much at the beginning. For beginners, keep it simple, even if it's not perfect. Something is way better than nothing. You'll get more finesse and nuance and things like that as you go on. I think sometimes they show you some different levels of politeness. That could be okay. But you can start with one general way of saying, of a greeting. I mean, how many greetings are there? There's so many, right? What to you is the most formal greeting? If you were going to greet somebody, what's the most formal? Maybe good evening.
Hello. How do you do?
How do you do? Yeah, to me it's how do you do. How often do you actually hear that?
Hey.
Not too often. Okay, skip that. Save it for later, right? Low frequency. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's also it's an idiom, right? It's an obsolete, largely obsolete question. How do you do? Yeah, right. I think maybe Prince Charles says that. Oh, excuse me, King Charles. So the next time you see King Charles, you can say that. But the rest of us poor slobs are probably just going to say, hello. How are you? Hi.
How's it going?
How's it going? How's it going, you say to friends, someone you already know. Right? Probably. How are you? You can say to anyone. So just kind of do a little bit of statistical analysis of how often are you likely to say this thing that you're teaching them. If you find in a book that they tell you that this is the way to do it, and you're kind of like, no, I would never say that. Don't teach them something you would never say. Books are not perfect. And if you would never say, I don't see anything too weird in here yet, but what's your first name, what's your last name, how do you spell that, right? I would say all those things. But, if they start out with one expression that works, then they can build on that. Remember I said yesterday, building on information plus. You want them to get something fairly solidly, and then they can build and expand and differentiate different levels of formality and so on. But everybody's pretty safe with how are you? It's nice to meet you, or nice to meet you.
We couldn't figure out how to, for somebody that doesn't know English, how to say nice to meet you. We were trying to figure out gestures and how to express it.
How would you express it? Let's see it.
Debbie had the best we could come up with.
So, kind of like a curtsy in a way.
But I don't know if they would get it. So that's the best we came up with.
I don't know. What do you think?
You just smile.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
It could be a lesson on introductions.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Do you think it's okay to teach them the words if they don't fully understand them? Like a greeting, if you say nice to meet you, can you teach them that and they don't really understand what it means? Or do you want to wait to teach them that until they can really understand?
Yeah, we keep getting back to thinking of everybody as an absolute rank beginner. So I'm not sure. What do you think, Deborah? Yeah.
You could sort of like an idiom. Would you want to teach them with someone an idiom at all if they didn't get it?
If they don't get every single word.
As long as it's not harmful. They're not going to get themselves in trouble saying it.
Yeah.
A basic meaning, but they may not really understand.
You've worked more with absolute zero students, have you? Yeah.
They got nice to meet you.
Yeah.
It's not like they're, exactly what does that mean? It's just like,
Right.
that's how you say.
Yes.
I understand what you're getting at.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. In most languages, people have something like that they say.
You could say nice to meet you to King Charles and he wouldn't kick you out. Probably.
Exactly.
You're going to be okay if you say that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not a risky thing. It's not, and they will, sometimes learning to say something that is a formulaic expression like that, okay? It's a formula. It's a chunk, will then make it possible for you to participate in conversations. And it's pretty likely somebody will say it to you, and so you can repeat it back. Nice to meet you too. Okay? Nice to meet you. Maybe just a gesture like that. Nice to meet you. Whatever it looks like to you. So I would encourage you not to agonize too much over every little detail right at the beginning, because you probably will actually encounter people that have more knowledge that are not I would discourage them from using their phones a lot to look stuff up all the time. If they want to look something up later, try to make them work at understanding. Also, as I said before, try not to let them have someone in the class be a crutch, who is then their translation service. Every time they want to know something, they ask her. It's disruptive, and it's not. I think that's kind of an imposition on that student. What were you going to say, Karen? You had a question?
When you're getting farther along in the ESL, is it more? Do you start focusing on the alphabet and making sure they know the alphabet, or the reading, or the?
As reading goes along, as you have some, it's good to do a little bit of what I would call error analysis of things that they write and read. You'll catch pretty soon, pretty quickly, if you ask them, if you're doing reading as part of what you're doing, and you probably will as part of your classes, when they want to know how to say these things, some of it you're just going to have to let them work through it. You can't teach all the phonics of English in the first week, but it's not bad to have some auxiliary phonics or reading text, since I don't think any of these English programs has that. But that would, I think, need to be its own sort of separate stream, and you isolate, you start with short vowels. Many of them will not have any problem with the consonants. The consonants on the whole are easier. You'll eventually get to things like digraphs, that is to say 2 letters together like TH. But the vowels are going to be the most challenging, I think, generally speaking. And so you can start off with words that have short vowels and the names of the letters. If they really don't know, and they don't know the letters of the alphabet at all, you can start with something that's very simple like this, that has letter names and pictures, and you just say these words. You don't expect them to read these, you just say what it is, so that those are keywords that they'll get the sound with. They'll associate a picture with an action like jumping, and they'll look at that. You don't actually expect them to read the whole word, okay, yet.
And one of those things that you mentioned, error analysis, I think is really good for students. If you, and it depends on their level, but if you show them something that is wrong, or you say, here is a sentence and something is wrong, it's a safe way for them to participate, because they already know there's a mistake. And so they're not the one making it, and they can just identify what is that mistake.
Yeah.
And it's like a warm-up activity, almost like what you did last week.
Yeah.
Okay, you come back in, there's something wrong with the sentence. What is it? What did we learn last week? And you could do something with he and she, or concept. But
Yeah, that's great, Ryan. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
I think we also have to think about who we're going to be teaching. If you're teaching refugees that came in, some of them come in and they're very educated. Some of them came from the rural areas, may not know alphabet in their own language. So all refugees have caseworkers or somebody that's working with them. That might be helpful to talk to them to see, can you find out a little bit about them. When they're plopped into our country, they get 3 months of help from the resettlement agency, and then you're on your own. The first thing that happens is, I think it might be good to get another. I think we've had one time that we had a little bit of an overview of what happens with refugees when they're resettled. Might be helpful to do it again, just so that we know kind of what to be looking for.
And would you have access to any kind of maybe report on how they're doing, or any testing that they've undergone?
Well, so when a refugee comes in, the caseworkers are under a lot of stress to get them ID, get them to the health department, get them an apartment, get them a bed, whatever, everything that they need. So those are kind of the extra stuff. But one of the things is they are going to need to be able to tell people their name, maybe spell their name, because their name might be difficult to write. They need to know about family, because they need to be able to say, I have 3 children. So all those things that they're gonna have to know right away, those could be helpful in formulating lesson plans. But you just gotta know a little bit about their background.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't know who we're gonna be teaching. So.
Right, yeah.
But if it is refugee, I'm happy to either myself or have somebody from the resettlement agency come. They could tell us more about who's coming into the country right now and who we might be able to encounter as we out there.
As you say, some people will be from maybe rural areas and have limited education, and others may have, master's degrees in engineering. Yeah, they're doctors. There was a doctor we were helping from Eritrea that went to Uganda, but sometimes sometimes they have a lot of kind of academic skills in their own language, and a lot of those kind of basic skills are very transferable to a new situation. People that are unfamiliar with books, who literally don't know which end is up, they don't know, and you will have to show them. Okay, it's not obvious to somebody who's never seen a book before which side is up and which side is down. But people who have a lot of skills, they know exactly how to use things. They can, even though they don't know all these words, they know how to interpret. They know that this is a heading. They know that this is one set. They can interpret a lot of like the layout of pages and books and even websites. Another thing you can really help students with is dealing with websites, because they are just a nightmare anymore. I don't know about you, but every time I pull something up, I get 100 pop-ups and ads that make it really hard to read. Even sometimes government sites are hard to read. So those are things that they might find useful as well. I didn't actually mention like pre-reading skills. For people who are not familiar with books, you may really have to help them learn how to find things in the books, because they'll want to start at the first page and like go from there. Well, sometimes what they're actually going to is quite a ways in there. They don't need to read this scope and sequence and stuff, like that's not relevant. So helping them find things, helping them find page numbers. They may not know where page numbers are. Or lo and behold, there's a map of the United States in the back of this book. Who knew? And other things like that. They also, this may sound like a small thing, but they sometimes don't know how to turn pages very well. Most of my students in Uganda, their method of turning pages, I won't do it to one of these books because it would be terrible. Could I have a piece of paper? Could I trouble you for that time? Just a piece of paper, yeah. As though this were a book, okay? First things first, lick 3 fingers thoroughly. Grab the page and crunch it and turn it. That is how pages are turned in Uganda, okay? By everyone from the president down to a 3-year-old. Do not know why. It's just one of those things. So you might want to teach them how to handle things so that they take good care of them. You don't want them to be afraid of it, but at the same time you don't want them to destroy something. You'll have to sort out matters of cost and who pays for what. I think in most of these kind of programs, people like the students to pay for their learning materials so that they feel more committed to the program and are maybe more likely to stay with it. But teaching them how to take care of things and how to manage things. If they haven't been to school, they may not know which side of a copybook to start with. Is it back here? Do you start writing in your exercise book back here? No, you start on this side. They may or may not know that. They may not know how to hold a pen or pencil or how to do it well. You may prefer not to have them use pencils in writing. My learners, the ladies that I worked with, they were these rural women. They were all built like Mike Tyson, and they were tremendously strong, hardworking people. And they would take a pencil and they would snap the point off of it with the first letter. because they just were really hard on things. If you have people, that may sound bizarre to you. It was very bizarre to me. I didn't expect it at all. So you'll have to see what kind of background your students have. Do they need help in learning how to write or hold things? They may prefer to use pens because those are a little more sturdy. Erasing things can be hard. So you got to get to know something about them ahead of time, I guess, obviously, and then try to tailor what you're doing to where they are. Okay. I have a lot of documents that I can share, that I can leave, that you can print out and look at. There's a really wonderful teacher's manual. We did bring some other things like English grammar books for reference. Remember though, when you're doing grammar, try to do it by example and not explanation. Don't use a lot of terminology that people then have to process and get confused with until you get to the higher levels when they might want that terminology. But for beginners, not so much. But these you can use to refer to if you're not sure about that. There's a bunch of them. There's some more in the ministry apartment. I have some documents and other things to leave with you. And Yonatan has a teaching manual that I think you guys got from the Baptists. That's honestly, it's fantastic. It's really good. Really, really good. Yeah.
You mentioned page numbers.
Uh-huh.
Do you teach numbers sooner for most people, or would we ahead of
A lot of the time they know those. My experience with a lot of people is that they know those, don't know a letter of the alphabet, but they know numbers.
Okay.
Money.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like it'd be more important.
It is very important.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
You can
to go
get
to
to
the
that.
store and get
Yeah.
2 things, not
Yeah.
1.
Right. Yes. The names and the numbers. And of course, when you're teaching T and teen, make sure those are very clear. 30 versus 13. Okay. That American pronunciation is a little tricky sometimes. Because they can end up in some bad situations by mispronouncing the names of the numbers. But they can write those down. Yeah. Numbers are a big one. Incorporate those. They use them in their phones all the time, but they should be able to say them. Teach them how you say amounts of money, how you say phone numbers. People do that differently in different countries. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but they do in. How do you say your phone number? You say 3 numbers, 4 numbers, right? Okay. They may come from a country where numbers aren't like that. They may say 22 instead of 22. I say my phone number 215-317. I say 1529. That's how I say my phone number. But that's clear to me, but it might be clear to say 1529. So teach them different ways of giving their phone number or giving their address, because those are also different from country to country. Okay.
How do you determine what a student is more comfortable with? I work with some people that were not literate or were just a little literate or whatever, so I could tell that, we could just do conversation and pictures and things like that. But some people learn better by writing, or, if they have more education, they might, unless they write it, they feel like they're not learning it or whatever. How do you?
We were talking about that before. I think, hopefully you don't have too much of a mixture in your class of people that are more literate and less literate, because that's hard to work with, of course. But even if you do, starting with the spoken word is good. And then, yes, giving them time to write things down is definitely worthwhile. Making them write it is good. If you write things, I often, when I'm just teaching, write things on the board as I'm talking about it. So that could be, they would have their keywords. If you have a board, maybe you have a keyword sort of section, and that's where you put those. And they can either write them down during the class, or you might have to say, okay, I'm going to write this word here. I'll give you 10 minutes at the end of class, and you can write them all down. Okay? see how much it interferes. If they want to just copy everything, that's hard. I think it's a question of seeing how much it interferes with the flow of the class, but knowing that writing takes time. So you've got to allow for that time, or you'll just run out of time. For example, like me here, it's already 10 after 6 and we've gone past time. It's hard to stay in the time constraints. So I guess this is Q&A. We're Q&Aing it. I hope I'm actually answering your questions. What are some other questions that come up? Yeah, Ryan.
Have you taught online quite a bit?
Teaching online, yes. I've taught online a lot. I haven't taught ranked beginners online. I have taught high beginners. So.
Did you use a tablet or something where you could break out a whiteboard?
Yeah,
you could write
yeah.
things down?
Wow, I wish I could. I can't really go on Zoom right now, can I? Zoom has a few features. I'll tell you what, if you use Zoom, we all have mixed feelings about Zoom. It has been a wonderful thing in our lives to help us communicate with people. It's also not as good as being there in real life in some ways. There are some slight advantages to doing things online. One is that some students who are shy actually feel more comfortable online because they can control how much you see them or hear them, and they have that little bit of distance. They can also use closed captions, and if you speak clearly, they can turn on subtitles, closed caption, live closed captioning. Not everyone has that on Zoom. If you have a university account or you can get one, it has that. So that sometimes for those who are literate, they love it because they can read along with you and they know what you're saying. It also records all of that. It records your class and it records a transcript. They can go back, and if there's something that they didn't get, they don't even have to ask or be embarrassed. They can look for it later. Will they do that? Some will, some won't. It depends on their tech savvy and the amount of time that they have. But at least it's an option. So being able to review things later is really great. The things that you have to do online, just remember everything you do with Zoom takes longer. So you have to scale back what you hope to accomplish in any given class. It takes longer. Every transition takes longer. Breakout rooms are for small groups. If you have a larger class, you can break people into these small groups, into breakout rooms. Are you familiar with this? Is everybody familiar with doing Zoom, doing this kind of thing? It's breakout rooms. It pulls up a little menu. You can click how many rooms you want, assign automatically, click open rooms, and off they go.
Just like sending people into.
It's like sending people into little rooms. What are the risks of that? The first risk is that they will speak in their native language if they share a native language. Life's like that, sometimes it's not perfect. They're less likely to do that in real life in small groups because you're standing there. So what's one of the things you can do? Well, you can pop into their breakout rooms. And it does have the effect that you might expect of shocking people. They'll go, teacher, and you say yes. And I usually try to assure them that I'm not there to be the police, but in fact I am there to be the police and make sure that they're speaking in English. But you check in to make sure that they understand the task, make the task very clear. You can put the task in writing, like if they are supposed to, I don't know, describe what they did over the weekend in 4 sentences or something. You can write that. Describe last weekend to each other, and each person's supposed to take a turn. Then they can come out of the breakout rooms, you click close rooms, and they all magically reappear on your screen, and everybody chuckles. And then you can call on people. If you're likely to forget people's names, it's really great because they have their names in their little boxes, so that's a winner for me. Sometimes I've had huge classes, so that was nice. You can do a lot of the same activities that you do in class by sharing the screen. If they have a digital copy of the book, you can open that digital copy on your computer, click share screen, and then it will pop up and you're all looking at the same thing at the same time. You can then circle little things on it with your cursor or not. You can also bring up a blank screen and they can write things or even draw. The whiteboard feature on Zoom I don't love. I didn't find it as easy to use. A lot of the time I would just pull up a blank Word document and have people, and you can click on annotate and then they can all write on it. That involves typing skills. The trying to write with the little pen doesn't work very well. It's, like it's like a little pen thing you try.
There's like a $30 or $40 plug into your computer or laptop you can use, and it gives you a pen. That's much easier to use.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Using your cursor like with a mouse is not great.
I just find it's like, and it's slow, and people get irritated, and then they want to erase it and rewrite it. And it's like,
One of the things we run into with at least parents that are immigrants at our school is they do everything on their phone.
Yeah.
So you have to remember that they may not have a laptop.
They may not have a laptop.
So everything's going to be...
It's going to be tiny. Yes, so if you're doing reading and they're doing it on a phone, forget it. Just don't. Just talk, because it's minute and you can't see it. And then they'll spend all their time trying to enlarge it or move this, and then they'll lose the screen, and you don't want the technology to take up so much time that you can't get anything done. So you'd have to, if they're using laptops, they can do more things. Also, you can put things in the chat, but the chat isn't always visible on a phone. That's another thing I discovered.
What about the length of the lesson? Does it matter? Is there any difference between live and online?
I've done some pretty long lessons. I think most people do definitely need a break in there after half an hour, 45 minutes, because you can't just stare like this. But I do that in real life also, in real life lessons, even if it's just a short break, even if it's just like, okay, stand up for 1 minute, do some stretches, get some blood moving, because you can't, it's bad for you to sit there. I've personally had a lot of neck problems during the pandemic from sitting in front of a laptop, so I appreciate that. Yeah, find out what kind of device they're using before you plan anything. But the other thing is allow transition time. The breakout rooms still work, though, with people using phones. Perfectly fine. Yeah. And you can put people in groups of 3, and again, that gives them more opportunity to actually talk. You may have to supervise those. You may have to come in and check and make sure they're actually doing something and that one person is not monopolizing the conversation. Sometimes you'll have people who are just more extroverted or more confident. For example, one thing I pretty much never do on Zoom is let people volunteer. I call on them because, first of all, that is one thing they do less of. They're more likely to sit there and wait for you to call on them. But that's also fun, because then you get to call on everybody, and the outgoing people don't monopolize the class and leave the others in the dust. So you call on everybody, and then you give them a chance. But again, there's always this little lag because everybody mutes themselves while they're sitting there, which, by the way, that is another disadvantage of Zoom classes. Man, if people don't mute themselves and they have a lot of people in the background, it
should be able to
is,
mute them as the host.
yeah, and the host usually can mute them. Yeah, that's quite right. Yeah, but you may have to do it over and over. Yeah.
So do you think our goal, just wondering, is our goal to teach conversational English, or are we teaching English as a foreign language? I mean, I don't know that, I don't feel qualified, you know. I don't remember a lot of grammar from when I was a kid. I haven't done homeschooling or anything, but I can teach you how to speak. I'm just wondering.
Yes, I think, yeah, yeah.
to
Building relationships and conversation, life skills. Thinking about what they need. They need fellowship. They need Christ. they don't already know the Lord. They also need to possibly fill out forms for the government, or get their kids to school, or sign up for something, or get to the supermarket, or figure out how to pick up something from the pharmacy. So those needs are, I think when you minister to people in their needs, in their weaknesses, it shows them this great love. And it also facilitates language learning. Because when something's important and you're communicating about it, you're going to remember that later. You're going to remember it, you're going to retain it, and you're going to build trust and interaction skills. You get to be their safe person, safe people. And then when they go to the pharmacy and they have to buy something and they can't find it, maybe they'll have that confidence to talk to the person they need to talk to. And that may make the difference between whether their little girl is well enough to go to school the next day or not. These things are all connected. But, so I would say, these are not grammar classes. People can, if they can do that later.
And they might just, if it's a one-on-one, sometimes they might just bring you a letter.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yes.
And so that might take, part of the lesson.
Yeah.
Or they'll bring you their bills and they're all in a Kroger bag. But that's another opportunity to teach you how to get organized.
Yeah. And you're negotiating for meaning. You're doing the very thing that you need to do to learn English. And you're talking about something that's meaningful to you. One other thing that this reminds me of is a lot of people coming from other countries who don't have a lot of formal education have learned a lot of things informally. What does that mean? It means they learn by doing, learn by interacting, and a lot of the time the things that they learned to do at home were things that had to do with immediate and pressing needs, like being hungry. Your mom taught you how to cook, probably your mom, maybe your dad, but probably your mom taught you how to make things. And guess what? Then you actually got to eat the food and you felt better, and it's very relevant. A lot of formal education is kind of representational and irrelevant. You learn principles maybe, or you learn algebra. No, not making fun of algebra. It's a very important thing in life. But maybe, that might not be the most important thing for our learners. But so in learning, in trying to help people learn English, you want to keep things relevant and related to important things in their lives. And then they will also learn the language better, okay? So, because as I say, it'll be relevant to them. Maybe you help them go through their papers and highlight the things that are important that they need to know later, or put them in order. Maybe you show them how to use a calendar. Then you get numbers, names of the days of the week, names of the months, those kinds of things. Maybe you put names of a doctor and the doctor's name and the phone number and the address. Ta-da! Then you used all those things that you had in lesson 1 that may have seemed simple, and you've applied them to something, and you've sent them off equipped and empowered to live their life and to speak English. And maybe when they show up to that place, they'll have some confidence that they didn't have before. I hear so many students talk about confidence, that's the thing, that when they build that confidence, they see that as a major personal breakthrough and really, really important. And it's then you've gotten rid of some of that debilitating anxiety. Okay. So do you see how these things can be related? I hope this doesn't sound crazy and disorganized. I want you to just be creative and see how you can relate real life to language learning and just being their friend. Yeah. What are some other questions? Let's see, you've got 2 minutes to ask something really brilliant. No pressure. That was a joke. There's a lot we don't know, right? Don't know who the students are yet, how many of them, where they're going to be, and so on. There are some evaluation documents that I have. There are shorter and longer ones but a lot of the time you can just ask somebody a few simple things. Just try to start a conversation and see how far you get. Make a note of some things that were maybe glaring grammatical errors. Can they put together an entire sentence? Can they pronounce the things that you can understand? What can they write down? If you ask them to write a paragraph about their family, can they? And they might say no. Can they write their name? Can they write their children's names? Yeah, so you can, sorry?
Or their phone number.
Or their phone number, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, we've kind of talked a lot about if their background is not great or proficient, I guess you would say.
Yeah, they're limited education. Yeah.
Right. At what point, when they start to advance, do you say maybe they're ready for something more a little abstract but useful, like parts of speech or like noun, verb, adjective distinctions, where it's not just they're inductively intuiting it, but they're actually recognizing it in a sentence structure and like placement and things like that? At what point would you say that would be?
At what point? That's a
Because
good
if they're
question,
writing
I'm not sure.
paragraphs,
Yeah, right. It's pretty far along. I hadn't thought about that today, about at what point. I think I'm thinking because usually the courses that I've taught, it kind of, it gave it to you at a certain point. I don't know, let me think about that. Yeah, let me think about that. I would want to look through a couple things. I guess I'm not a huge fan of grammatical terminology because I've seen people agonize over that right up to higher levels who actually were really pretty competent, and the terminology didn't seem to help them. It was giving contrastive examples that really helped them to see what it was.
And they knew innately what a noun was without being able to say a noun is a,
Yeah,
I mean, they knew innately
right.
what the verb was. And they knew how to use it.
They knew how to use it, yeah. The other thing is that a lot of the time they may be coming from, their native language may have such a really, really different structure that it's kind of hard to wrap their heads around that connection. Or super different word order. Yeah. Auxiliaries. Helping verbs. I never liked that expression. It sounds so cheesy.
Verbs.
Yeah, transitive and intransitive. That would be, I'm thinking that's more like a level 300, 400, and these are more like, we're thinking 100s. Yeah.
There's a place that used to produce informational booklets. It's called Center for Applied Linguistics. And they would have like this booklets, or like the little booklet right there of different countries and the people coming from those countries, so it would have a little bit of history of what a conflict may have been, a little bit about the people, and then at the end it would have a little bit of the language and just kind of what the meanings are. I don't know if they have it
so
for the
cool.
latest refugee groups, but I know they had it for the ones that when I was working with them, which was 15 years ago.
No,
And,
I love,
they
that
were
sounds so
great
cool.
little books, yeah.
Yeah, the Center for Applied
So we
Linguistics,
can
they're
maybe
still around.
look through the church and see if we can. I mean, by now, maybe they're available online, who knows? I mean,
Yeah, pretty good chance they'd be available online, yeah. I mean, you can try looking up, sometimes you can just Google these languages, and you can find these linguistic articles that are unintelligible, but you can also sometimes find, honestly, even Wikipedia. I don't usually recommend Wikipedia, okay? But they do sometimes have a little bit of information encapsulated, in kind of in a nice little package about a certain language, and show some sample sentences, so you might get a bit of an idea of the word order or something like that that's distinctive. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about levels. So, like, what would level 1 looks like, or level 2? Like, so they would graduate from like level 1 to 2. Yeah.
The easiest thing probably is to just show you what the books are like. That gives you a rough idea, because I think it would take a little too long for me to describe that. But yeah, your big issue is going to be the fact that they'll even a single class is going to differentiate in the space of a few months, probably.
Would you like just group them then, like depending on
you try?
Like what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everybody I've talked to that's worked, especially with ranked beginners, has said try to group people by level, but again, that doesn't necessarily last. So, because people have different issues, either life responsibilities, aptitude. Some people are fabulous language learners, either because they're already multilingual, or they just have a knack for it, or they just love it, and others, it's not something that comes easily to them. And I don't know what you do. I mean, you may have to reconfigure. You might have to have sessions where you do something for, 10 weeks. And then after that, you kind of reconfigure things. Or if you're doing like one-on-one stuff, it doesn't matter. You've got your level. Or even a couple of people. Yeah, Deborah?
Frequency of classes?
Yeah.
What do we
It also depends on what the volunteers are willing to do. One of the things we did talk about was having in-person. It's got to be, I would say, like you and I were saying, ideally 3 times a week. Twice a week would be great. Yeah, everybody's going, what? Like when I was first learning a foreign language, we spent 3 entire evenings a week, and let me tell you, we learned. We killed it, man. We really learned, because that's how much time you need to do all these charades and all this, like, figuring things out and repeating things. And if you're going to have time to pray, or if you want to add in a Bible story. By the way, we have some good Bible story visual aids, like little story pictures, to help you tell stories like that. I can share some of those with you. But if you can do 1 in person and then maybe 1 online, if that's the only thing that's practical, 2 in person would be great. Somewhere between an hour and a half of like beginning to end. Remember, there's always lag time. People are late. People have to leave early. People walk in and out, depending on your situation. If you go to their home, you don't have to worry about being late, because you'll show up. But they may not be ready for you. You get there and, well, they're still having dinner, and it's like, okay. So maybe you just chill. Maybe you just chill and be a nice guy and hang out, and you enjoy some of their life, and you say a few things. And you're going to keep your expectations low. Not so low that you don't care. That doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that you allow for things to move slowly and at their pace, and in a way that helps them. So that, for example, I thought that was a perfect example. Show up with a bag full of papers that they don't know what to do with. And then you can help them with that. And that might be the lesson that evening. And it doesn't follow what's in Side by Side or Touchstone or any of these other guys, because these are meant for classes that show up and are far more formal. So what do you think? What's realistic for you, and what's realistic for them as far as time? Honestly, the best way for them to learn a language is to be completely immersed in the target language, in English, a minimum of 4 hours a day. Ideally 5 or 6 hours a day. They should be surrounded by English, communicating in English. That's why kids that go to school do much better, You know, they are. They're surrounded by it for hours. Most of these folks are not. This might be their little blip on the screen that week. That's all they get, you know, is your class. But you can assign them movies and English movies. I don't know. Well, it's getting late. I don't want to go on too long. I'm sure there are more questions. I live only a few hours away. And I've got a phone and a computer, and I am very happy if anybody just wants to even call up and shoot the breeze about how things are going, or you have any questions, or you have a cool idea. I think it'd be great if you had, you know, maybe a WhatsApp group or something like that, or a Signal or whatever it is you like to use to share some ideas. Hey, this went well. Have meetings regularly of some kind, whether it's on Zoom or in person, or maybe you just chit-chat after church sometimes and say, hey, this is going well, this is not going well. You can ask me, you can ask each other, and I think Deborah has offered to be somebody who can, you know, a resource. So.
Thank you, Martha.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I feel like I just scratched the surface, but I hope this is a step in the right direction, and you feel some.
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Yeah.
These books, how we can make sense of them? Are those the ones over there that we would use?
You can come over. I'll show you. Yeah. These are the higher level books. You may not need these at all, but some of your people may want these. There's some for medicine, business. These are academic books that are used in colleges, but some of them are lower levels, and they come with teaching books. So if somebody wanted to use these, Jonathan has some of these as well. This is a prep book for the TOEFL test. For some people. So these are higher level on the whole.